Howdy folks, in front of you is a custom Kershaw 1-ton in Bohler K110 that I recently finished. Now, the 1-ton was a knife that I was not at all enthusiastic about upon receiving. It was suboptimal in many regards and had several glaring issues which really kept it from being a functional folding knife, for me at least. So it spent most of its time just sitting in a drawer because I had many other knives which were optimized for performance and ergonomics and things of that nature, and this knife didn't compete at all with those. So I redesigned it, made a custom blade for it, and now I can confidently say that this 1-ton sitting in front of you blows the stock model out of the water. So let's take a look at it. Now it looks quite a bit different than the stock Kershaw 1-ton. First, let's start with the handle. As I showed in the previous video, there was this peak right here between the groove for your index finger and the groove for your other fingers. And that peak very heavily dug into my middle finger when gripping the knife. Made it basically an ergonomic nightmare. And if you tried to adjust your grip to mitigate that hot spot, you ended up back on the knife like this. And because of that, you had very little control, and you could put very little power into the cut you were trying to make. So by eliminating that, I can now do a hammer grip with, relatively high comfort, and a saber grip with relatively high comfort. So, ergonomics are much improved just by taking out that peak. Of course, I rounded all the edges on the G10 to make sure there's no hot spots. Also on the steel frame here. Now, the blade is the most obvious difference in this knife. First off, I put sort of a downset thumb wrap here. It's just more intuitive to hold the knife like this, and because your thumb is resting on the spine, you have a lot more control and can put a lot more power into your cutting. Now, I made the blade larger than it was on the stock model. I was able to fit a lot more blade in this handle than Kershaw gives you, and I was able to do that without having the blade interfere with these standoffs or come out the back or anything like that. So, there it is. It's a full height convex grind. Starting to develop a slight patina because I have been using this some. So it is a little bit darkened, and you can probably see some smudges on there in areas. Now, another thing I did was eliminate the ricasso that the original 1-ton had. It had a ricasso that came to about right here. Then you had a non-functional sharpening notch, and then the edge started from there. So I eliminated that, brought the primary grind and the edge as close to the handle as I could get it in order to eliminate that leverage disadvantage. And I added a functional sharpening notch. It's just in front of the plunge lines, and you can sharpen all the way back to the end of the edge without having any issues. Now, by making the blade bigger, I was really trying to approach that ideal 1-to-1 blade handle ratio, and I'd say I got pretty close. I was able to squeeze a lot more blade into the handle, which is an obvious plus. Now, it is ground pretty thin. The edge is right at 1/8 thou, and it's a consistent 1/8 thou until you get up here closer to the tip. I left the tip a little bit thicker in order to, of course, have increased tip strength. Now, I did also make the plunge lines diagonal in order to mate well aesthetically with the handle scales, and also just to prevent any issues with having a different plunge line angle. Let's say if I did it straight back, it'd be inset in the handle. You can run into some issues with the track the detent ball runs on by doing that, so this was just the ideal way to do things. Now, I did a partial distal taper, so it maintains full stock thickness for a majority of the blade length, and then distal tapered it near the end. And it's a relatively fine point, but it's a robust fine point. So it's not something I'd really worry about snapping off. However, you do get okay penetration. Of course, with this blade shape, it's not going to be as good as, you know, some others, but it works. Took some inspiration from cold steel on the thumb stud. I originally just intended to do a bolt here, but it interfered with the handle design, so I just did the threaded portion of a bolt. Cut a notch in the back of it so you can switch it with a flathead screwdriver. And of course I sharpened this on the wicked edge. And even with the edge being this thin, it still took several hours to do. The primary grind guide took me like an entire day to do and get to this finish. Now there's still some deeper scratches from the 36 grit belts, which I really wasn't too worried about, you know, grinding out at this point because I had already put a wicked edge on there. I didn't really want to risk damaging the edge or rounding it off by doing, let's say, like a Scotch Brite belt or something like that to help remove some of those scratches. So when this edge starts to wear and get dull, I will go ahead and remove those deeper scratches from the blade. Some of them couldn't be helped, though. I originally was using some 36 grit 3M aluminum oxide belts. I broke 8 belts on this one blade when it was in the annealed state. The batch was obviously defective. The adhesive that connects the belts at the seam, there, you know, it's a butted seam, but it obviously wasn't cured because it was sticky and gooey, and you could literally pull the belts apart with little effort. So the blades kept snapping at the seam in my sander, and when they'd snap, they'd fly off and take big gouges out of the annealed steel. So I tried to remove as many of those as I could, but, you know, I really wasn't going to screw up the profile of the blade by, you know, just worrying about, you know, a few scratches here and there. Of course, this is going to be a user. It's not designed to look pretty. It's just designed to function well. You know, I put all the effort into making it a more functional, high-performance knife rather than, you know, a thing of beauty or an art piece. Now, as I said, it's ground extremely thin, and I hope I'm going to be able to give you the, yeah, there's the edge profile. As you can see, or maybe not see, it tapers down to nothing. So this is going to cut a hell of a lot better than the original Kershaw 1-ton did. I mean, just look at that. And because this is a K110 steel, an analog of D2, this is basically an optimal grind for this steel because it's so hard to grind and sharpen. You really want it to be as thin at the edge as you can possibly get it to help mitigate those issues. Another thing worth noting is the plunge lines for the primary grind are absolutely perfectly symmetric. Let's take a look at that lockup. Lockup is at about 65, about 65%. Ground the lock face on the blade tang at 8 degrees, and I'm proud to say that the lockup is rock solid. I mean, there is no play in any direction. Not bad for my first lock face grinding. And also, let's give you a look at the detent. Very positive, absolutely no detent play. And now blade centering. Blade centering is absolutely perfect. Could not get any better than that. Which is difficult to do when you're removing this much metal from the blade to make a grind that thin and have a tip that tapers down to basically nothing like that. So as I said, this basically blows the stock model out of the water. It wasn't the smoothest knife to begin with because there is a whole lot of resistance in this lock bar here. I also had to surface grind down all of the folding knife blades that I made to get them to basically be accommodated by the handle. And the tolerances I took those to were down to 1/100th of a millimeter. So the blades fit flawlessly. You know, they fit just like the stock blade would. And you really need that if you're trying to make a folding knife that, you know, doesn't act squirrely when you try to actuate it. So, there it is. Custom Kershaw 1-ton and Bohler K110. Got several more knives that I will upload videos of here in the near future that I am finishing and have finished, so stay tuned for those. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.